Women of Olympus, Circe, Medusa, and the goddesses of Greek mythology, the untold stories of the most powerful women in the ancient myths retold. By Aurelia Voss. Introduction. Professor Aris used to sit in a small office that smelled like peppermint tea and very old books. She had spent 40 years studying the ancient world, but she didn't look like a typical teacher. She looked like someone who knew a secret. One afternoon, she held up a picture of Medusa. Most people see the snakes and the frozen faces of terrified men. They see a nightmare. Professor Aris looked at me and said, "They didn't give her those snakes because she was evil. They gave her those snakes so no one would ever dare to hurt her again." That one sentence changed everything. It was the first time I realized that the stories we know are often upside down. We are taught that the powerful women of Greek mythology were monsters, witches, or jealous wives. But when you look closer, you see something else. You see women who were survivors. You see women who were smarter than the kings and gods who tried to hold them down. The lesson Professor Aris taught me was simple. If you want to find the truth, you have to look behind the mask. For thousands of years, these stories were told by men who were afraid of a woman's power. They turned that power into something scary, so that other women wouldn't try to find it within themselves. The labels that bind us. You might feel a strange connection to these ancient myths, without even knowing why. Perhaps you have been told you are too aggressive when you were just being clear. Maybe you've been called difficult, because you refuse to let someone walk over you. You might feel like you have to hide your ambition, or your anger just to be liked by the people around you. This is the likability trap. It is a modern version of an old Greek cage. We are told to be like the good characters, quiet, helpful, and invisible. When we act like the bad ones, bold, loud, or independent, we get labeled. We become the witch of the office or the monster of the family. It is exhausting to live a life where your best traits are treated like flaws. It's frustrating to feel like you are a supporting character in your own life, waiting for someone else to give you permission to lead. You are likely tired of playing small. You are ready to stop apologizing for your strength. The promise of the myth maker. By the time you finish this book, you will not look at these monstrous women the same way. More importantly, you will not look at yourself the same way. You are going to become a myth maker. You will learn how to take the labels people have thrown at you and turn them into tools. You will discover how to use soft powers like patience, craft, and wisdom to win battles that brute force could never touch. You will learn how to set boundaries that no one can cross, and how to navigate the crossroads of your life with total confidence. We aren't just reading old poems. We are digging up a toolkit for your life today. This is about reclaiming your own story. It's about moving from being a victim of your circumstances to being the queen of your own domain. A voice from the glass room. Elena Rossi knows exactly what it feels like to be trapped in a story she didn't write. At 34 years old, she is a senior account manager at a big advertising agency in Chicago. She is the daughter of Italian immigrants who taught her that hard work is the only way to get ahead. So she works harder than anyone else. She stays late in her high-rise office, her eyes tired from the glow of the computer screen. But the gods of her industry, the men in the glass conference rooms, don't seem to notice her hard work. They notice her tone. Her director recently told her she was too unemotional during a pitch, yet in the same week, he said she wasn't assertive enough to be a vice president. Her ideas are often repeated by male colleagues, who then get the credit. Elena feels invisible. She feels like she is shouting underwater. One night, while waiting for a late dinner at a Greek diner, she found a dusty copy of the Odyssey on a shelf. She started reading about Circe, the woman who lived on an island and turned men into pigs. For the first time, Elena didn't see a villain. She saw a woman who was finally left alone to do her work. Elena is at a breaking point. She is realizing that staying quiet and working hard isn't going to save her. She needs a new strategy. She needs to learn how to look back at the people who are trying to freeze her in place. The path ahead. We are going to follow Elena as she learns to apply these ancient lessons to her modern world. Along the way, we will meet the thinkers and poets who shaped these stories, like Hesiod, who feared women, and Ovid, who saw their pain. We will look at the work of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, a woman who realized over 100 years ago that we have to rewrite the divine rules if we ever want to be free. The journey starts with the most famous face of all, Medusa. We will learn why her monstrous gaze is actually the ultimate tool for setting boundaries. From there, we will visit the queens, the witches, and the weavers. You will learn to own your reputation, even when others try to tarnish it. You will find the power in strategic isolation to master your craft. You will discover how to use your cunning wisdom to win the invisible wars at work and at home. The goddesses of Olympus are waiting to show you the way. They have been silenced for too long, and it is time to listen to what they actually have to say. Let's begin. Chapter 1: The Day the Mirror Shattered. Elena Rossi sat in a glass-walled conference room in the middle of downtown Chicago. Outside, the wind whipped between the skyscrapers, but inside the air felt frozen. Her boss, a man who liked the sound of his own voice a bit too much, was leaning back in his leather chair. He had just finished telling Elena that while her data was perfect, her delivery was too much. "You have a bit of a resting bitch face, Elena," he said with a small fake smile. "It makes the clients nervous. You look like you're ready to turn them to stone. Try to look more inviting." Elena felt a heat rise in her chest. She had spent 60 hours that week building a plan that would save the agency millions. She wasn't trying to be scary. She was being focused. She was being professional. But as she looked at her reflection in the dark screen of her laptop, she didn't see a leader. She saw the monster her boss wanted her to believe she was. He was using his words to paint a picture of her, and for a moment, she believed the paint was real. This feeling of being labeled a monster for simply existing with power isn't new. It goes back thousands of years to a woman named Medusa. Most people think they know her story. They think of a woman with snakes for hair and a face so ugly it turns men into rocks. But the monster we see in movies and on statues was actually a woman who had her story stolen from her by two very different men. Long ago, around 700 BC, a poet named Hesiod wrote a book called Theogony. To Hesiod, the world was a scary place filled with clear lines between good and bad. He described Medusa as a gorgon, a beast born of sea monsters. In his version, she was never a human girl. She was born scary, lived scary, and died scary. To Hesiod, there was no reason to feel sorry for her. She was just a target for a hero to find. But hundreds of years later, a Roman poet named Ovid decided to look closer. In his book Metamorphoses, Ovid gave Medusa her humanity back, but he also gave her a tragedy. He wrote that Medusa was once a girl with hair so beautiful that every man in Greece dreamed of her. She was a priestess in the temple of the goddess Athena. One day, the sea god Poseidon saw her and attacked her inside that temple. Instead of helping the girl who had been hurt, Athena was angry that her temple had been dirtied. She punished Medusa by turning her famous hair into hissing snakes. Ovid wrote that her beauty was the cause of her ruin. In this version, Medusa wasn't a monster because she was evil. She was labeled a monster because powerful people didn't know what else to do with her after she had been treated unfairly. When someone calls a woman difficult, aggressive, or intimidating, they are usually doing what Hesiod and Athena did. They are taking a person's strength or their pain and turning it into a scary story so they don't have to deal with the truth. In ancient Greece, people actually used Medusa's face as a tool for protection. They called this apotropaic magic. They would carve her snake-covered head over their front doors or on their shields. The idea was that her scary face would frighten away bad luck and enemies. They realized that the very thing society called a curse could actually be a powerful shield. Back in her apartment that night, Elena stood in front of her bathroom mirror. She looked at the sharp lines of her face, and the way her eyes didn't blink when she was thinking hard. For years, she had tried to soften her expression. She had practiced smiling more until her jaw ached. She had tried to be the inviting girl her boss wanted. She realized then that her resting bitch face was actually her aegis, her shield. The people who were scared of her look weren't actually in danger. They were just uncomfortable because she was looking back at them without fear. Her boss didn't want her to be inviting, he wanted her to be easy to ignore. Medusa's gaze only turned people to stone if they couldn't handle her truth. For everyone else, she was a guardian. Elena stopped trying to fix her face. She realized that being a monster in the eyes of a person who wants you to stay small is actually a sign that you are growing too big for their cage. The labels people give you are often just a reflection of their own fears. The mirror only shatters when you stop believing the reflection belongs to someone else. Chapter 2: Who Gets to Tell Your Story? In 431 AD, a group of men in long robes gathered in the hot, dusty city of Ephesus. They were there to vote on who deserved the title, Mother of God. For hundreds of years, the people of Ephesus had loved a different queen. They had built her one of the largest temples in the world. They called her the Queen of Heaven. But by the time the sun set on that meeting, the old queen's crown was taken away. The Council of Ephesus decided that her titles now belonged to the Virgin Mary. Hera, the mighty ruler of Olympus, was officially erased from the throne. Her power was hidden away, and her stories were changed to make her look like a villain. Most people today think of Hera as a mean, jealous wife. In the movies and books we grew up with, she is always screaming at Zeus. She's the one who hunts down the women Zeus liked. We see her as a shrew, a woman who is never happy and always looking for a fight. This is the label the world has stuck on her for thousands of years. But if we go back to the very beginning, before the poets got a hold of her, we find a different goddess. Before she was ever married to Zeus, Hera stood alone. She was the goddess of sovereignty. That is a fancy way of saying she held the right to rule. She didn't need a king to be a queen. The poet Hesiod is one of the main reasons we think Hera was a nightmare. He lived a long time ago, and he didn't seem to like powerful women very much. In his poems, he made sure Zeus was the only one in charge. He turned Hera into a roadblock. He wrote her as a constant problem for the great king of the gods. He wanted men to see a powerful woman as a danger to peace. He was one of the first people to gaslight a goddess in writing. By making Hera look like a jealous mess, he made it seem okay for men to ignore what women had to say. Elena sat in the break room of her Chicago advertising agency, her hand frozen over the coffee pot. She heard her name through the thin wall. The Rossi account, a man's voice whispered. She only got that because she's the CEO's favorite. You know how she is. She's always charming him in those late-night meetings. Elena's face burned. She had spent 6 months on that account. She had stayed up until 3 a.m. for weeks. She had found the data that saved the client millions of dollars. Now the men in her office were rewriting her hard work as a cheap trick. They were turning her into a character she didn't recognize. She felt like Hera, judged not for what she did, but for how others wanted to see her. In the 1800s, a woman named Elizabeth Cady Stanton noticed this same pattern. She looked at the Bible and the old Greek myths and saw a world where men held all the pens. She realized that if men are the only ones writing the history books, women will always look like the jealous wife or the difficult worker. She decided to write the woman's Bible to set the record straight. She knew that if you don't tell your own story, someone else will. And they probably won't be fair about it. Elena didn't walk into the next room and scream. She knew that if she got angry, they would just call her emotional or unstable. That would play right into the trap Hesiod set a long time ago. Instead, she went back to her desk and opened a new folder on her computer. She titled it The Facts of the Case. She put every email, every data sheet, and every positive client review inside it. She decided that her reputation wasn't something people could give her or take away. It was something she owned because she did the work. Hera was originally the goddess of the season. She represented the perfect timing of nature. She wasn't just a wife, she was the protector of the order of things. When she got angry in the myths, it wasn't because she was petty. It was because someone had broken a promise or disrespected the rules. She was the guardian of boundaries. When we reclaim her story, we realize that jealousy is often just a word people use for a woman who is standing up for what is right. Think about the labels people have put on you lately. Maybe they call you bossy when you are being a leader. Maybe they call you difficult because you said no to a bad deal. These labels are the same ones they used on Hera at the Council of Ephesus. They are tools used to take away your crown and give your power to someone else. If you were to look at your life right now as a book, who is actually writing the chapters? Is it you, or is it a coworker who doesn't like your success? Is it a family member who wants you to stay small? If you are tired of being the shrew or the supporting character in someone else's drama, it is time to pick up the pen. You have the right to rule your own life. What is one story people tell about you that isn't true? And what are you going to do today to start writing the real version? Chapter 3: Mastering the Art of Divine Isolation. But Hypatia, why do you choose to be alone? Every powerful man in Alexandria wants to marry you, a young student asked, his voice echoing in the great hall of the library. Hypatia didn't look up from her scrolls. I am already married, she said calmly. The student blinked. To whom? To the truth, she replied. And truth is a very jealous partner. It does not like to share my time. In the late 4th century, Alexandria was a city of noise. People fought in the streets over gods and gold. But inside the library, Hypatia created a different world. She was a master of math, stars, and philosophy. While other women were expected to manage households and follow the lead of their husbands, Hypatia followed the lead of the planets. She chose a life of intellectual isolation. This choice made people nervous. To the leaders of the city, a woman who didn't belong to a man was a woman they couldn't control. They began to whisper that her knowledge was magic, and that her influence over her students was a form of witchcraft. They saw her quiet study as a threat. Hypatia was living the real-world version of the Circe myth. In the old stories, the gods became afraid of Circe's power, so they sent her away to the island of Aea. They thought being alone would be a punishment. They thought she would wither away without the light of Olympus. But they were wrong. On her island, Circe found her true strength. Away from the drama of the gods, she began to study the plants, the earth, and the animals. She mastered the art of pharmakia, the use of herbs to create change. She wasn't lost on her island. She was focused. The power of the island. For many women today, the idea of being alone or unavailable feels like a failure. We are told that our value comes from how much we do for others. If we aren't answering emails, helping a friend, or checking in with family, we feel like we are missing out or being selfish. But there is a difference between being lonely and being sovereign. Sovereignty means you are the ruler of your own space. Like Circe on Aea, you need an island where the noise of the world cannot reach you. This isn't just about taking a bubble bath. It is about strategic isolation. It is the act of closing the door, so you can master your craft without someone else telling you how to do it. When Circe was on her island, she didn't just wait for something to happen. She worked at her loom. The rhythm of the weaving was her meditation. It kept her mind sharp and her hands busy. This is the secret of the witch's loom. It is a metaphor for the deep, focused work that happens when you stop trying to please the crowd. Alina's Saturday morning. On a rainy Saturday morning in Chicago, Elena Rossi sat in the corner of a quiet coffee shop. Her phone was face down on the table, switched to Do Not Disturb. For years, Elena had been the fixer at her agency. If a client was angry at 9 p.m. on a Friday, Elena was the one who answered. Her boss, a man who valued hustle over results, praised her for being always on. But Elena realized that being always on for him meant she was always off for herself. She was so busy weaving other people's stories that she had no time to weave her own. As she sat in the coffee shop, she felt a familiar tug of guilt. What if the director needs that file? What if the junior team has a question? She took a deep breath and opened her laptop. This was her island of Aya. She wasn't working on agency business. She was working on a project she had kept hidden for years, a data-driven strategy for a non-profit she actually cared about. At first, the silence felt heavy. She kept wanting to check her notifications. But as she started to type, the rhythm took over. The guilt began to fade, replaced by a sense of mastery. She realized that her availability had been a way for her boss to tame her. By being available every second, she had given him the keys to her time. By choosing to be lost for 3 hours, she was actually finding her power. The historical echo. Hypatia eventually paid a high price for her independence. In 415 AD, a mob that feared her influence took her life. They destroyed the woman, but they couldn't destroy the idea she represented, that a woman's mind is her own territory. Today, the mobs are different. They don't come with stones, they come with pings, dings, and the social pressure to be likable and helpful at all times. When you choose to step away, to go to your own island, people might call you distant or not a team player. They might even use the modern version of the witch label. They'll call you difficult. But remember the lesson of the island. Circe didn't become a legend because she was helpful to the gods. She became a legend because she mastered herself in the silence. Your isolation isn't a wall to keep people out. It's a workshop to build the best version of yourself. When you finally decide to leave the island and show your work to the world, you won't be coming back as a supporting character. You'll be coming back as a queen. Chapter 4: Ambition, the Fire of the Forbidden Goddess. In the winter of 1692, an enslaved woman named Tituba sat in a freezing jail cell in Salem, Massachusetts. She was the least likely person in the colony to hold any power. She had no money, no land, and no rights. To the Puritan leaders, she was a nothing. Yet within weeks, this woman became the most feared and influential person in the village. The village was on fire with fear. Young girls were screaming and pointing fingers, claiming they were being pinched by invisible spirits. The leaders wanted a villain, and they chose Tituba because she was an outsider. They expected her to cower, confess, and be hanged. They didn't realize they were dealing with someone who understood the crossroads, the place where life changes forever and you have to choose a path. Instead of staying a victim, Tituba did something shocking. She started telling stories. She described a tall man from Boston and a book signed in blood. She spoke of flying through the air on poles. By claiming to have secret knowledge of the dark, she took control of the room. The men who owned her were suddenly leaning in, hanging on her every word. She used their own fear to keep herself alive. She was channeling a very old, very forbidden kind of power, the power of Hecate, the goddess who sees in the dark. Long before Salem, the Greeks told stories of Hecate. Most people today imagine her as a spooky old witch in a cave. But in the oldest myths, she was a titaness of incredible rank. Even Zeus, the king of the gods, honored her. He let her keep her power over the earth, the sea, and the sky. Hecate was the goddess of the crossroads. She was often drawn with 3 faces, so she could see in every direction at once. While the other gods stayed in their bright palaces, Hecate was the only one who could walk through the dark. When Persephone was taken to the underworld, the other gods were clueless. Hecate was the only one who had been watching. She carried a torch, and she guided the way. For centuries, women with secret knowledge, midwives, healers, and thinkers, were labeled as followers of Hecate. If a woman knew how to use herbs to stop pain, or how to lead a community, she was called dangerous. This is where the fear of the witch comes from. It isn't a fear of magic, it's a fear of a woman who knows things that men cannot control. It is a fear of female ambition. Elena's glass cliff. In a glass-walled office in Chicago, Elena Rossi felt like she was standing at her own crossroads. Her director had just offered her a promotion. On the surface, it looked like a win. She would be the head of the legacy accounts department. But Elena knew the truth. That department was a sinking ship. The clients were leaving, and the budget was gone. Her director wasn't giving her a promotion, he was handing her a glass cliff. This is a real thing that happens in business. Women are often given leadership roles only when a project is failing. If she failed, he could blame her. If she succeeded, he would look like a genius for hiring her. Elena sat in her office late that night, the city lights reflecting off her desk. She felt like she was being set up to be the villain of the story. She thought about Hecate. She realized she didn't have to just say yes or no. She needed to look at the crossroads from all three sides. The risk: if the department failed, her reputation would be ruined. The reward: she would finally have the title she deserved. The exit: she needed a way out if things stayed messy. The next morning, Elena didn't just accept the job. She wove a new contract. She told her director she would take the role, but only if she had a doubled budget and the power to fire the people who weren't working hard. She stared him down, her face calm and her voice steady. She wasn't asking for a favor. She was showing him that she saw exactly what he was trying to do. Like Tituba in the courtroom, Elena used her knowledge of the dark parts of the office to claim her own ground. Reclaiming the fire. Ambition is often treated like a dirty word for women. We are told to be helpful or team players. When a woman wants power, she is called calculating or cold, much like Hecate was turned from a majestic goddess into a scary hag. But ambition is just a torch. It is the light you carry so you can see where you are going. Being at a crossroads is a moment of great power. It means the old path is over, and you get to decide what the new one looks like. When you find yourself in a transition, a new job, a breakup, or a big move, you are in Hecate's territory. You don't have to fear the dark. You just have to be the one holding the light. You have to be willing to look at the situation from every angle and realize that you don't need anyone's permission to lead. The fire of the forbidden goddess isn't meant to burn you down. It is meant to show you the way out. The office was quiet when Elena finally left for the night. She didn't feel like a victim anymore. She didn't feel lucky to have a job. She felt like a queen who had just secured her borders. She walked to the elevators, the sound of her heels steady on the floor, ready to lead her new department through the storm. Chapter 5: 3 Keys to Reclaiming the Gorgon's Gaze. If you walk through the ruins of Athens today, you will see quiet piles of stone and sun-bleached marble. Tourists take photos where the ancient law courts once stood. It is a peaceful place. But in 350 BC, this spot was filled with the sound of shouting men and the smell of dust. A woman named Phryne stood in the center of it all. She was on trial for her life. The men in power accused her of being impious, which was a very serious charge. They wanted to ruin her. Her lawyer, a man named Hyperides, could tell the case was going badly. The judges looked at Phryne with anger. They had already decided she was guilty. In a final, desperate move, Hyperides walked over to Phryne and pulled away her robe. He didn't do this to shame her. He did it to show the judges her divine presence. The judges did not laugh or jeer. They stopped talking. They were stunned. It was as if they had been turned to stone. In that moment of silence, they couldn't find the words to punish her. They acquitted her and let her go free. This story is the real-world version of the Gorgon's gaze. In the old myths, Medusa's eyes turned men to stone because they saw her as a monster. But in the story of Phryne, we see that a woman's presence can be so strong that it stops an unfair judgment in its tracks. This isn't about being pretty, it's about being undeniable. The power of the shield. When the poet Ovid wrote about Medusa in his book Metamorphoses, he did something different. He showed that after